In September of 1994, a company called Psycho released a game called Gunbird to the arcades. It's a vertically scrolling shoot-'em-up following the wacky misadventures of a few adventurers who seek to find the pieces of a magic mirror to take to an altar in order to summon a genie who will grant them a wish. But along the way, a group of pirates who seek to obtain the mirror for themselves attempt to thwart them, and so the player must play as these adventurers, fighting the pirates and their army through 7 stages of action. The game's honestly really charming. One of my favorite things about it is that as you travel throughout the stages, you can see the pirates moving along caring about their plans in the background. I love how calm they look. I love how omnipresent the antagonists are, and it's one of my favorite things about how this game presents its story. It's impressive. Also, the music is excellent. Psycho's games tend to not have very standout music, but Gunbird is the exception. Anyways, the main playable cast consists of 5 characters: Marion the young witch, Volnus the Russian robot, Yuan Nang who's basically a female Sun Wukong, Tetsu the gay old man, no I didn't make that up, and Ash. I don't like Ash, but I'll get into that later. How's the gameplay? Well, I guess I should give a little background before I get into that. Many of Psycho's staff originated from a company called Video System, who debuted in 1987 with the influential horizontally scrolling shooter Rabio Lepus. However, it wouldn't be until 1991 when the first little inklings of what would become Psycho's style of STGs started showing up when Video System released Turbo Force, a 3-player vertically scrolling shooter where you play as a flying car. It featured a straightforward power-up pickup system, with the player's weapons slowly leveling down as they fired more shots. The ideas in Turbo Force would be refined in their next release, Sonic Wings, or Aero Fighters as it would be known as internationally, with you now being able to choose from a variety of wacky characters, introducing bombs and score pickups into the mix. The power-ups now bounce across the screen at certain intervals, and it starts the player off on a set of randomly selected stages, with later stages forcing players into checkpoints if they continue if only one player is playing. One of the more reviled mechanics the game introduced, and it also unfortunately removed auto-fire in the 3rd player. After the release of this game, many of its developers led by Shinsuke Nakamura would leave to form their own company, which was Psycho. But according to Nakamura, they didn't actually know what they wanted to make, so they basically just created a follow-up to Sonic Wings in the form of Sengoku Ace, a game set in Sengoku period Japan but with characters flying planes. It featured some gameplay improvements from its predecessor, like allowing a second player to control a completely different ship, a charge shot that takes way too long to fire, though it at least justifies the lack of auto-fire a bit more. Now your weapon only powers down if you're fully powered, and featured more subtle and hidden new mechanics like the score pickup coins rotating, which would change your score depending on which angle you picked it up from, though it's extremely difficult to pick it up on its shiny side for more points. The game was apparently a hit, as they went on to follow it up with Gunbird, which probably featured the least amount of gameplay changes between their games, as in none basically. It just has more detailed graphics, better sounding music, and more refined level design and bosses. Now Psycho's STGs tend to catch a lot of flack because they exist in this weird middle ground between the old school Toaplan style games of the late 1980s and the cave style bullet hell of the 2000s. Now I hate to bring this up for comparison, but it really is the perfect comparison to make. Psycho's games have the same reputation as the original 2D Sonic the Hedgehog games. Older players think they're all dumbed down baby games and products of corporate 1990s cynicism, and younger players think they're completely unfair hard trial and error games. And just like with Sonic, both sides are wrong, but you get exactly where they're coming from. I honestly really like Psycho's style of games. It's just addicting, and playing these games puts me in a trance. I mainly view them for their positives in comparison to the games that surrounded them, as I think they're much more fair and properly forgiving than a lot of older STGs, and I think they have way more easy and simple aimed bullet patterns than a lot of later bullet hells, being more about actually minimizing the amount of hazards on screen rather than dodging them like in those games, at least outside of bosses. If you struggle to get into those other kinds of arcade shoot 'em ups, Psycho's games might be for you. But I do understand why some people dislike a lot of the mechanics in Psycho's games, especially in their early ones like Gunbird. I'm not a big fan of the first few stages being random, like at least let the player select them, but it doesn't bother me too much. It's something you get used to, but I must admit it leaves the game with somewhat of a lack of a real difficulty curve. There's also the game sending you back on the last 3 stages, which actually usually only happens in the Japanese and earlier console versions, and yeah, I'm not a fan of that. I don't mind checkpoints in these kinds of games, but I hate their inclusion in co-op games if you're playing by yourself. Luckily, Psycho's games actually stopped having that mechanic around 1999. There's also the charge shot inherited from Sengoku Ace, and once again it takes way too long, almost 4 seconds to charge, and it really isn't worth the risk of using as it barely does any damage, and most of the charged attacks in Gunbird suck in terms of reach too, though thankfully it's the last Psycho game where it takes so long to charge. I also hate it for turning the game into a button masher. It's not the worst thing ever, but my hand gets tired after playing these games. There's also the mechanic of your weapon powering down if you're fully powered, which there are 4 levels of power in Gunbird. This forces you to keep on your toes and stay fully powered, which wouldn't be a problem if the game, and by extension Psycho's other games, and quite a few other games in the genre, didn't have a hidden dynamic difficulty system. Every time you pick up a power-up or bomb, bullet speed and enemy aggression increases. Honestly, it's such a simple change, it's actually kind of likely you'd figure this out on your own, but now you know. It's why you never see me fully leveled in this footage, and honestly, it really isn't that much of a problem in my opinion, but I also understand that it's a hidden mechanic that's going to make the game much harder for a lot of casual players who of course are going to try to pick up every item they see. But it does offset the issue of the first few stages not really scaling in difficulty. But you can also avoid power-ups and take the pacifist route as every boss times out, though the game doesn't give you any kind of reward for it. Another mechanic in the game is that if you collide with an enemy, you'll become dazed for a second and power down, and if you're not powered up, you lose a bomb, and if you don't have a bomb, you lose nothing. Yeah, I'm telling you all this just to let you know in case you think this game looks cool and you want to play it, but you really don't need to know a lot of this stuff to just play, and figuring the stuff out on your own is part of the fun, but it's good to know. And a lot of the stuff I criticized are just mild annoyances. These games are the definition of deceptively simple. Don't let the whole modern game design analyst stigma around arcade games being fundamentally unfair scare you away from this game or genre, because it's not true. The niche hard games get the most attention, but this genre isn't inherently niche. I don't believe in the whole shmups for beginners thing. If you think a game seems cool, just play it. You might not like it, but it's worth trying. Don't just view games as part of a ladder to other games, you'll never be satisfied. That being said, while I loved the gameplay despite my nitpicks and some of the lambuxuacious elements of this game, I don't feel I can entirely recommend this game to everybody, for the reasons I just got into and some I'll get into later. If anything I said was a turnoff though, I understand. But I will say, this game is hard, but it's not that hard. I mean, look at my score. It only ends in a 7, and I suck. Okay, quick tangent for those who don't know what that means. There's a mechanic in some shoot 'em ups where if you continue, instead of a 0, you'll get a 1, 2, 3, so on added to your score for how many times you continued, as a sort of mark of shame. Now, I don't agree with and am against the whole "you didn't actually beat the game if you didn't clear it in 1 credit" thing, but I don't mind this mechanic. I mean, if you're playing casually, not caring about how much you die, then score probably doesn't matter to you. and there it carries over into the score you had before you continued. But in some games, your score will reset to whatever number. Now, I know what you're thinking, and yes, there is a game that makes that mistake, and it's Dodonpachi 2 B-Storm. In that game, if you continue 10 times, your score will add 1 point and end in 0 instead of stopping at 9, which is what most games do. Though Saikyo games make use of the last 2 digits, meaning you can continue 10 or 20 times and make it look like you never even died, which is hilarious. As far as I know, the first game to include this mechanic was Capcom's 1941 in 1990, so that's a surprisingly influential game. Anyways, let's get to what you probably came here for, like 10 minutes into the video. In December of 1995, Gunbird was released for the Sega Saturn and PlayStation by Atlus. This was a weird time for STGs on consoles, as the compiled PC Engine style of home games were quickly phased out and the genre was actually moving back into arcades. As such, the Saturn and PlayStation had way more arcade ports relative to original games compared to previous systems. And for once, the technology was finally there for developers to put together arcade-accurate ports for home systems. Except not. The home versions of this game have you playing the game in a reduced screen size, so in order to preserve a lot of the gameplay, the screen will move up and down depending on where you are. This was a very common feature of ports of vertically oriented arcade games at the time, and here it works surprisingly well, though the Saturn version also allows you to play with your TV flipped, which emulates the experience of the game accurately, which was also a common feature of a lot of these kinds of ports from this time period. It also features an arranged soundtrack, though I don't think it's as good as the original, and the addition of voice acting during all of the story scenes. Speaking of which, I forgot to mention, but in this game, there's actually special story scenes and endings for each character combination in co-op, which is awesome, though I'll sadly probably never see all of these. That combined with the fact that you have 2 different choices for an ending in single player means there's a total of 20 endings in the game. My favorite thing about these story scenes is that they reveal that Marion's little pet rabbit, Pom Pom, can speak. He's my favorite character in the game. I like to imagine he sounds kind of like Malcolm McDowell or something. You're cool. Fantastic, Marion, you're fantastic. Never mind, Marion. Anyways, in 2003, a company called XS Games would release a game called Mobile Light Force for the PlayStation. Now, I know what you're thinking. What does this have to do with Gunbird? Well, it is Gunbird. XS Games was a publisher of budget games based in New York who scooped up the rights to publish some Saikyo games in North America and Europe after they shut down in 2002. Apparently, they didn't think people would want to play a game that looks like this, so they changed the cover to this completely unrelated set of Charlie's Angels looking characters, probably piggybacking off of the film Charlie's Angels Full Throttle, which would come out a little over a month after this version of the game released. This was also used as the replacement title screen in the game, though the Gunbird name still appears on the score entry screen. They also changed the title music to the boss theme, which is incredibly off-putting and actually kind of creepy in a weird way. This version of the game just comes across as a lazy ROM hack with a few things changed, but a lot was removed. They removed all of the bonus content like the gallery, and it seems they were too lazy to localize the story scenes, so they removed all of them as well. This leads to a problem where whenever you reach a boss, the game still pauses at where the pirate's dialogue would have been. In the original game, it was slightly annoying as given that this is a button masher, you could skip through all of these scenes on accident. Not that they're anything special, but still. But here, you don't get them at all. To be fair, they didn't remove the audio clips of characters during gameplay for whatever that's worth. That being said, some of these changes, they renamed Ash to Jason Last and Tetsu to John Sares. Yeah, these are names of employees of XS Games. Good thing they removed the story scenes then, cause I don't know if they'd want their names associated with these characters. But the oddest change in this version is renaming Volnus to MILF 2000. MILF 2000. I'm guessing they wanted it to be MLF, like Mobile Light Force, but somehow they have a character named MILF2000 in an E-rated game. Honestly though, the gameplay is still solid, though I did glitch this boss out. Not sure if that's capable of happening in the original Japanese version, but this is still a terrible version of the game. Also, fun fact, the first time I played Mobile Light Force, I played it on the easiest difficulty setting, and I accidentally 1 credit cleared it without even trying. Now, I never go out of my way to do that stuff, though of course I like challenging myself to see how long I can last in these kinds of games, but yeah, I have that to my name. I really wonder though if someone's parents bought this for them for whatever reason, or just because it was a cheap budget game. I really wonder if that person got into STGs through this game. Now that would be fascinating. I'm genuinely curious, so if you did have this game back in the day, please let me know what you thought of it in the comments. Now, Mobile Light Force isn't the most obscure thing ever. You probably already know about it if you watch Classic Game Room, but I'm shocked it isn't more of a meme considering how insanely misleading the box art is, basically being an outright scam. But if you didn't know about it, now you know. Mobile Light Force is a terrible way to play Gunbird. Don't do it. I don't really have much more to say about it than that, so let's move on to talk about Gunbird's sequel. But before we get there, I guess I should mention something that happened between the release of the first game in 1994 and the second in 1998. Marion from Gunbird appeared in the really good Saturn port of another Saikyo game, and possibly their most famous one, Sengoku Blade, the sequel to Sengoku Ace. She's unlocked by beating the game as all 6 of the other characters, though it's a bit more complicated than that. You can look up how to do it online. And shockingly, for a very hidden character, they still put a lot of effort into her inclusion, with fully voice-acted cutscenes. She's also easily the best character in the game, and she transitioned really well to the horizontal format. Weirdly, Pom Pom is mute in this game, which makes him oddly adorable. Honestly, I'd say Sengoku Blade is actually kind of better than the Gunbird games, and I prefer vertical scrollers. I don't know why I'm not talking about it instead, to be honest. Anyways, in Marion's ending in this game, she begs for a Gunbird 2 starring her. Well, 2 years later in 1998, she got her wish. But screw that, the Dreamcast version of Gunbird 2 features Morgan from Darkstalkers, baby. When the game was released for the Sega Dreamcast in 2000, Capcom published it, and so Saikyo included Morgan as a hidden character you can select by pressing up on the random character selector. This game was part of an initiative started by Capcom at this time where they published and distributed a bunch of STGs by third-party developers, including Takami's Gigawing 1 and 2 and Mars Matrix, Rising's Great Maho Daisakusen or Dimahu or Daimaho or whatever in 1944, Cave's Pro Gear, and IGS's Doronpachi 2 B-Storm. Okay, that's the second time this game has come up in this video, what the heck. Outside of the Dreamcast version of Gunbird 2, Saikyo also created the game Cannon Spike for Capcom, which was a weird crossover arena run and gun beat 'em up thing that plays like Saikyo's STGs, but not really. I would want to talk about that game, but I don't think it's very good, which sucks because I think the idea of a 3D co-op beat 'em up run and gun starring various Capcom characters is a good idea, but it just didn't work well in execution. But it's not a terrible game, and it is funny seeing Mega Man punch a zombie dog. They also made a Mahjong crossover game with Capcom as well, but I don't care about that. Anyways, Gunbird 2 features a few new improvements as Saikyo's style had evolved a bit since its predecessor. For one, the charge attack is quicker to pull off and varies depending on how much meter you built up. And you have a secondary attack I never used. You can chain score pickups, which I never did, and you no longer power down from being fully powered. This time, the plot revolves around God himself challenging everyone to travel the world to collect the elements of the sun, star, and moon to bring to him, and he will create a potion that does whatever they want for him. But once again, a group of pirates uses everything in their power to try to stop you and get the elements for themselves. This time, the character's inspiration from the anime Yatterman's Dorombo gang is more pronounced. But I want to talk about God for a second. See, a weird thing about God in this game is that in the original version, he was this elephant dude who was a clear parody of Sato-chan, the mascot of Japanese company Sato Pharmaceuticals. In the Dreamcast version, they replaced him with the character Jonken Dog, the mascot of Saikyo's adult mahjong series Tyson Hot Gimmick. Yeah. Anyways, none of the characters from the previous game return other than Marion and Volnus, technically, and unfortunately, I'm not much of a fan of the new cast here. That being said, the game still looks good, though unfortunately you don't get to see the antagonists in the background as much, and the soundtrack here might be better than the first games. The only problem is almost every song sounds the same, something that the first game avoided. But it's a very nice, cute sounding soundtrack. But other than what I mentioned, things are largely unchanged from Gunbird 1. The Dreamcast version once again includes voice acting, but only in the Japanese release, and a bonus gallery of artwork, and it supports 3 different screen modes. One with wobble, like the previous port, which is what I played on, one without the wobble, but the screen size is still smaller, and the Tate mode where you have to flip your TV over. I'm honestly kind of baffled as to why they did this though. They clearly could have fit the entire resolution of the arcade screen on the Dreamcast as other games on the system did, and the game sadly has this really ugly anti-aliasing. Though I guess you wouldn't have noticed playing this back in Y2K on a CRT. I have to give props to Capcom though for allowing them to use Morgan in this game, and releasing the game along with their other STGs from this time outside of Japan. Capcom really was the MVP of the Dreamcast. Their first 14 Dreamcast releases in Japan has to be one of the best publisher runs on a system ever. Unfortunately, because Capcom only published that version, Morgan is only playable in the Dreamcast version of Gunbird 2. So if you want to play as her, take note of that. But I recommend every Darkstalkers fan check this game out if you haven't. I mean, you don't really have a whole lot else anyways. That being said, this game is definitely way harder than the original. One of Saikyo's 3 hardest games, but I actually think the lowest difficulty level in the Dreamcast version is easier than the first, so take that for what it's worth. So which game is better? I genuinely don't know, they're both pretty equal. But I guess Gunbird 2 is better mechanically. So what about Gunbird 3? Well, I got bad news everyone, there is no Gunbird 3. But there was a third spin-off game, Gunbarich, a breakout style game that stars a younger Marion and is also aimed at a younger crowd. Yeah, I don't know if I trust a company that made adult mahjong games to make a game for kids, but it's pretty good, though, and I'm saying this as someone who loves this style of game, it's honestly unremarkable. There's also other Gunbird media out there like a manga that released a bit after the first game, but I don't have much to say about it. But yeah, I totally recommend you check out the Gunbird games. But, and I've been putting this off, I need to give a bit of a content warning, as there's a fair bit of disturbing subject matter in them. Now, I'm not trying to be that person, I just don't want to recommend a game to anyone without letting them know it may contain stuff that'll make them uncomfortable. If you still want to play these games but want to stay away from this kind of stuff, just stay away from the characters Ash in the first game and Ain in the second game. I'll just say, if you pair Ash with Marion in co-op, he's revealed to be, well, what you used to need Adobe Reader to open, and eyeing is the common for the 90s negative stereotype of gay people. But in terms of how I personally feel about it, I just don't find this stuff funny. At least in Gunbird 2, the Ash and Marion ending in the first game is kind of funny, if still jarring, but in Gunbird 2, the eyeing stuff's just edgy for edginess' sake, which sucks because Ayin, who's actually a guest character from the Sengoku Ace games, is a pretty funny character in those games, and not like he is in Gunbird. I actually think these games would be much better if they were generally T-rated wholesome all the way through, and in fact, if you ignore these two characters, they kind of are. Now, I'm all for games trying to be more than one thing at once, and I'm cool with some dark or dirty humor in these otherwise wacky games, and it should be noted that the protagonists of these games aren't supposed to be heroes. The entire thematic backbone of these stories is one's selfish desires, but I do think subject matter in situations this twisted are just way too off-putting and unfitting contrasted against the rest of the game. So yeah, I recommend these games, just viewer discretion is advised. At least it's not as bad as some things in other Saikyo games. Also, I should note that I hear that a lot of the modern ports of these games aren't great, as they feature some heavy input lag, so do your own research to see which version you'd rather play. Though for Gunbird 2, I really recommend the Dreamcast version just for its inclusion of Morrigan. Just don't play Mobile Light Force. Oh, yeah, I guess I need to mention, Mobile Light Force actually got a sequel on the PS2 that uses the exact same box art. Now that's lazy. Mobile Light Force 2 is an unrelated game called Shikigami no Shiro. Still has no resemblance to Charlie's Angels, though just like Gunbird, it is a vertically scrolling flying person shooter. It seems to suffer from a lot of the same problems as the first Mobile Light Force, but it is a little better. I'm not all too familiar with the Shikigami no Shiro series. I played a little bit of the second game, but I'm definitely down to play more of the series. That being said, this isn't even the weirdest localization of one of these games. Shikigami 2's English PS2 release as well.
Interested in my body, aren't you?
Not interested.
Oh, you're into that.
I like girls, but now it's about justice. Go home. Regret this.
Oh my god, this is the best game ever made. Anyways, thanks for watching. Special thanks to my patrons. Let me know if you'd want to see me talk about other Saikyo games in the future. There's still plenty to discuss concerning them. I'm gonna cut things off here. Have a great day.